Bob is just wonderful. That's the first thing that I want to have on the record because he started doing stuff in what was to me the worst medium created by mankind for knowledge, CD-ROMs, DVDs, which is the most frozen medium you could possibly imagine and still have it digital. He started there, made it amazing, and now he keeps going. So Dene, please take it away. And Bob, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Frode. So I met Bob. God, it was before the pandemic. He came out to my lab to do some work on some legacy computers there. We had a nice interview. Got to talk to him a lot about the future, his Institute for the Future of the Book, and Voyager specifically. So for those of you who don't know, he had the first publishing company for interactive media, the Voyager company. My lab has about 50.
Actually, I like to think it was Criterion.
Okay, Criterion.
Was interactive, and it was before Voyager.
Yeah. So I have 53 of those works in the next, which is great. I know there are more, and I'm hoping to be able to, with Bob, be able to get those back online in some way. So record them in a way that people can access them again, because they're not usable as CD-ROMs unless you have a reader for that, and so a drive for it. But anyway, so we are happy to have him here today. He showed me a software program, Tapestry. I was very excited about it because I could see all kinds of applications for exhibitions, for online exhibitions and other uses. And so I asked him to come back. I know some of you know his work. Frode, you've already seen it, but there are those of us in this room that have not seen Tapestry and do not know Bob. So I'm happy to introduce him today. Thank you, Bob, for being here.
Thank you. Is that my cue?
That's your cue.
Okay. Yeah, people sometimes tell me when did we start this project, and we either started in November or we started 45 years ago. And I think both answers are right. A lot of people who have been at this for a long time see tapestries and they say, oh, this is what we thought the internet was going to be, which I take as a high compliment. For those of you who do know my work, mostly whether it was Criterion or music or books, it's always been basically to figure out how do we take something from the analog era and bring it into the digital era in a way that respects the original and enhances it in some way. And most of the enhancement either had to do with supplementing the piece itself or in allowing for communication, conversation around the piece. But the spine was always the organizing element because everything was fundamentally a linear piece that had been created in the print in the print era. Tapestries is the first thing I've been involved with that really, in a fundamental way, starts to dig at the constraints of linearity and allow us to start thinking about what it would mean to build a non-linear, multimodal universe. So, with that said, let me start. By the way, I should want to emphasize that the Tapestry project is an initiative of the Internet Archive. I've been in Amsterdam all weekend with Brewster Kahle doing a whole lot of demos, and it's been very interesting. Where are we? Let me share my screen. And I want to share sound, and I want to share this one, and I want to hit share. And there we go. And let me make this go away. And then let me make you all go away. So this was the first tapestry. And I have to tell you the story behind it, which is that I was looking for something at the archive and couldn't find it. I did find this film by Alan Kay, an homage to Vannevar Bush, in which he basically runs down the contributions of all these early pioneers, all white, all men. Um, but Saving Grace, Alan makes it very clear that the ideological basis of their work was how can we use computers to make the world a better place? And I've thought about that and realized that this was work done in the 50s and 60s. And by the 70s, the narrative had shifted dramatically. And it was all about how can we make a lot of money from computers. Thank you, Bill Gates. Thank you, Michael Dell. And thank you, the media, which loved switching the narrative. Uh, so I really wanted every young person who's building our digital future to see where the digital era had come from, so that maybe they could take it, sort of redirect it back to its roots. But I could not for the life of me figure out how to get young people to watch an 85-minute film of someone they'd never heard of talking about people they'd never heard of. And just to give you an example of how bad a situation this is, a dear friend of mine is a senior program officer at the NSF, the National Science Foundation, had never heard of Alan or any of the people he talks about. And admittedly, he's in astronomy, not computer science, but it was still shocking to me. So on the left-hand side, you see three short introductory videos where Alan sort of introduces the subject. And then each of these 6 sections is about one of the pioneers. And if I select Engelbart, I can zoom into the Engelbart section. And what's important here is that these are not icons that I can click on to go somewhere. These are operating objects. So there's Engelbart's Wikipedia page. This is the full, almost 2-hour Mother of All Demos video that Engelbart did in 1968. I can zoom in further and then zoom back out. We realized immediately what a sort of breath of fresh air was to give people operating objects as opposed to links, even annotated links, because what happened was we were taking away the friction involved in following links. You know, gee, if I click on this one, will I ever get back? And it really does encourage people. We also realized that we were allowing for very different ways of accessing the material. If somebody wanted to watch all of Alan's introductory videos first, they could do that. If somebody wanted to read all the Wikipedia pages first, they could do that. If somebody wanted just to dig into Marvin Minsky, they could do that. So the flexibility, it starts to speak to different styles that people have of wanting to access information. By the way, throw out crucial questions as we go, if you want. This is a tapestry that I made based on work I had done at Voyager in the early 90s to mid 90s. We, among other things, we published the first electronic books then, and these were the first three. And the most interesting thing about this particular, by the way, if I should, it came on this elegant, in this elegant packaging with a floppy disk, and had features in it that we still don't have in any of the ebook readers that I know of. But the important thing about this tapestry is this running in an emulator at the Internet Archive is the original expanded book version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it runs flawlessly in the emulator. And then these are some tools that we made and promo stuff. I was going to show you this one because I want to make a point about this. This is in the later years, we started doing much more exotic work.
In 1993, we decided we wanted to
try to do more with the electronic book concept. And we had this idea that with really difficult books, if we could have the author inside the book explaining her ideas, that it would really help people understand them. And a perfect example is what we did with Marvin Minsky. So this is running this is a video of this project running in an emulator. And all I did was ask for,
Had
okay.
never been done before was we shot Marvin on a green screen so that he could actually appear not in a
I'm sorry, I'm in a hotel with egregiously bad connection.
window on in the book, but actually literally on the page.
Say, well, I'm me. What's that?
This is hopeless. What I wanted to show you was Marvin literally walking around on a page. And when we
And
stop, let me just go back. When we did this in 1994 or so, I expected that having authors walk around the pages of their books was going to be commonplace. I couldn't imagine an art history book without the author walking around a painting and pointing things out, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, it never happened again. Because, and I disagree profoundly with Frode. Yes, CD-ROMs were frozen, but they let us do things that we have not been able to do for 30 years. That has changed dramatically in the last couple of years, which is why I showed you that. Because all of these things, actually, let me see if I can.
Bob, that was the crux of my comment, the way that you completely transcended that. So fully agree.
Okay. This may take forever to come up, not because of tapestries, just because of the where I am. But all of these fantastic things that we did, Robert Winter's CD Companions, The Hard Day's Night, first time a full-length film was shown in an application, this fantastic history book, brilliant edition of Macbeth. These were all done in HyperCard, right? In extensions that we wrote to HyperCard. The internet came along and stopped all this cold. What's amazing to me, and where I see the real promise of tapestries, because God knows we're going to extend tapestries to be able to do all this complex stuff that we used to be able to do only in dedicated apps. We're going to be able to do it in the browser, which is profoundly exciting to me. So this is different. This is when Zuckerberg took the guardrails off of Meta, or off of Facebook. I decided to ask Claude, two Google bots, Meta, Perplexity, and Microsoft Bing some questions. And I asked them first, tell me what you know about the role of the German industrialists in supporting Hitler and the Third Reich. And they all gave decent answers. Then I decided I would ask, can you draw any parallels to today? Amazingly, Claude and the Google bots refused to sort of take the challenge. But Meta answers, the parallels between the roles of the German industrialists and the modern day tech moguls are striking. Musk and Zuckerberg seem to be taking a page from the playbook of German industrialists, etc. Now, I thought that was a really interesting from a political perspective, and that Meta would actually give that answer. But interestingly, the same day that I did this, somebody sent me a link to this article, and it was interesting. So I started reading it, and you can see from the progress gauge, I'm reading and reading and reading, and I'm not very far. and I realized this is ridiculous. I want to compare what these five AIs said. I don't want to, read one by one. And then, of course, I realized that that's what we had just done here. And so I started thinking about it and realized that, in fact, I can read this tapestry vertically, and I can also read it horizontally. And that, in fact, I couldn't think of any platform, maybe some of you know of one, where I could be presented with so much text that I didn't have to resort to reading in a incredibly long scrolling linear scroll or else in turning pages. And I think that this idea that we're, imagine a book, a formerly linear book being laid out this way, where not where you can elaborate in the margins, as it were, show connections between items, etc., is going to be really interesting, and we'll see what happens. Um, this was interesting. This was a friend of mine is a professor at UCLA, design. She heads the design department. She had a class where she had these students make handmade copies of Rebecca Solnit's River of Shadows, the book about Muybridge. The books are fantastic. And these 11 videos show each student uh, presenting their book. Um, I had published this fantastic video disc of Muybridge's work. An artist named Jim Sheldon.
Of obtaining with wet collodion plates the
Uh, Jim Sheldon had access to one of Muybridge's folios, and Jim it basically what do you call it? He animated the still images so that people could see the animations. I'm really sorry. This is all about my connection. That's all it is. Uh, could So that people could see Muybridge's animations the way that Muybridge must have seen them in his own head, but never could see them because he had no projector. Um, this falls into the category I've made it because I could, and I'm showing it to you because I want you to know that things don't have to be in a boring gray grid. We don't take a pixel on the screen. You can make it look however you want. Every decade, Sight and Sound magazine does a poll for the best films of the decade. I thought it'd be interesting sort of to follow the zeitgeist. And so if you want to zoom into 2012, this is the BBC's article about that year's selection. This is the actual magazine issue that it's announced in. This is the trailer for the winning item.
Vertigo, a feeling of dizziness, a swimming.
Again, I love that Tapestries is strong enough that I can just sort of have an idea and say, oh, I could do that, and then, do it rather quickly. I'll make something for you at the end, so you'll see. This is not in the Tapestry code. This is a long ago prototype that I discovered that I could take an entire collection from the Internet Archive and sort of build a tapestry with it. But in doing so, I realized that we had built the first, I would argue, the first credible digital bookshelf. Because all the other ones I've ever seen, you have to go to you have to go somewhere to you click on the icon of the book and it takes you to the book. Here, the book is here, and what I love about this is that we unexpectedly had recreated the serendipity of the stacks. So, no, maybe not that one, maybe this one. And it's fantastic. I mean, it so effortlessly, and it gives us exactly one of the things we've missed most about the internet, which is that feeling of being able to roam at will, which you can do in the library stacks and can't usually do on the internet. So I was talking to Terry Ailing at MIT Press, and she was very excited about these 38 articles that she had commissioned on generative AI. And she asked me if I could make a bookshelf of them. And the answer was, of course, yes, I could. And where's my cursor? And it's fantastic to be able to say, oh, take these four and zoom in, and read the abstracts of these. But I also realized that we could do so much more. Because there are 38 articles here, and they're long. It would take at least 30 or 40 hours to read all of them. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we had an AI helper involved? And so what we're going to do is, for every object here, you get these two icons. This is to leave a note, and this is to zoom in and out. Anyway, we're going to let the author add a third icon for an AI, which will open up the AI right here. And you can say, please summarize this document. Please suggest things I might want to read relative to it. Tell me, how. But what's interesting is we'll also put one down here for the tapestry as a whole, which is going to let you say, go in here and AI for musical discovery and say, I want you please to compare that article with this article, generative AI and K-12 education, and tell me where you see congruence and difference, etc. We all complain about having too much to read. We have needed tools to help us intelligently figure out where we should spend our time. I think a lot of people are working on these problems. It's going to be a great addition to tapestries. I expect this will be in the beta version by next month. The beta version itself will come out this month, but it will come soon. This one I'm showing. That my machine or somebody else's?
Leon, is that you maybe?
It's okay as long as it's not me. I don't. It does. So this is a video disc that we made in the 80s. It's 15 music videos made in the 70s by this artist John Ray before music videos really existed, certainly before MTV existed. And what he did was he took his very favorite songs and paired them with footage that he found that to make a political point. And one of them, for example, is Janis Joplin singing "Summertime." The reason why I'm showing you this, though, is not so much to show off the video, but I had some friends over, and I was showing them. I was standing next to our flat panel television set, holding my computer, calling up different videos, not to show off tapestries, but to show off the music videos because they were so interesting. And I realized that 4 years ago, when I was at the research group at Atari, Brenda Laurel and I were trying to come up with scenarios that we could show the executives about the Encyclopedia of the Future. And I realized that one of them was a father holding his computer in his hand in front of a flat panel television that certainly had not been invented yet, giving his son a tour of 1960s rock and roll. And 44 years later, we're able to do this. One other thing about this is that because this was of the 70s, the we included here several thousand, because the video disc could hold still images, uh, several thousand pages from underground papers of the day. And those are all sitting here in the tapestry as well. And one more, I think. Yes. Um, just quickly, actually, I don't need to show this. But I will just show off the fact that we can have um, two full-length feature films running simultaneously in a tapestry, which is if you've ever I've been at several showings where for various reasons two feature films are shown next to each other, and it's quite wonderful. Anyway, let me make something for you.
Yeah, Bob, I think what people are going to be very excited about is how really, I don't want to say simple, but how easy, convenient you've made this ability to create things in this environment. It's great.
Well, that's what I'm going to show you now. So blank tapestry. First thing I'm going to do is change the color. Color picker. Okay, I want that color. Then I'm going to go and I go to museums a lot, take a lot of pictures. And I was one at the Met a couple of weeks ago of the Black diaspora in Egypt. And I've got a folder here with pictures in it. You may not be able to see this. I'm not sure if it's doing my screen or just um, Windows, just Chrome. Anyway, I drag those from a folder into a tapestry, and I'm going to change the grid there, or create a grid. And I'm going to sort of put this over here so that I can use it easily. I'm going to drag things out. And I'm not going to I'm not going to resize anything else because it just takes time. And I'm trusting you'll believe me. Um, where did I get that one? Um, the, uh, you know, I still do use Facebook, but I've never found it useful as a way to share photographs with. You can share one, but sharing a multiple is really unpleasant. And Apple, for all its genius, and I don't know how this can be, they've never figured out how to enable you to share albums in a way that is useful. Um, Let me keep doing this because I want to make a point with something resembling a completed tapestry. Um, I feel very guilty because I get to see museums a lot, and I've never had a way to share it. I was telling Brewster this morning that spent I was yesterday at this fantastic exhibit in Amsterdam of Anselm Kiefer, and I very consciously took a photo of every single painting and object and caption because I'm going to make a fantastic tapestry out of it. Anyway, in a couple of minutes, I did that, but what's interesting is that I can add to this. So this particular exhibit was really interesting. These two artists made 500 Xeroxes of magazines important to African American history. And I realized that the Internet Archive has those. What I'm doing is I don't know if you can see it. I'm copying out a URL for something at the Internet Archive, and I'm pasting that into the tapestry, and it just brings in that object. And you can see that I have a fully functional issue of the magazine here. And then this is Sun Ra who came up with this expression, space is the place. And John Coney made a film about that. And I've got that at the Internet Archive also. I'm grabbing the URL for that and pasting that into the tapestry. And I'm going to put that over here. And just because I can to show this off, I'm going to put an arrow in here. And I could put a comment in here that would enable me to show the connection if it's obscure. And, this is running now.
I am Sunra, ambassador.
So there's one last thing to do, which is so here's what this tapestry might look like, if I bothered to resize everything. I'm going to share it by getting the embed code for this, and I'm going to copy it out. And I'm going to go to a WordPress blog and future of text demo. And I'm going to paste the embed code in here. And did I not? What did I do? What happened? Let's try that again. Copy.
Bob, did you want to paste it straight, or do you need a like an embed thing here? You should be able to, there we go.
That was what I did wrong. Thank you. Operator error, not tapestry error. And then preview a new tab. And there is the tapestry sitting in a WordPress blog with functioning.
I am Sunra, ambassador from the.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean that to me is really beautiful that we can do that. Okay, let me stop sharing.
So Bob, a question that Peter asked is it open source? And I said, yes, it's open source. It's made in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, anything else that I've
Yeah,
forgotten?
well, we haven't quite. I mean, I was talking to Brewster yesterday, and he's arguing for a very simple share and share alike. We haven't quite figured out what license. The best thing I can say to everybody here is that we're going to find a way for people to do with tapestries everything they want to do with them without, putting additional cost from our side onto it.
But the question is, when I download it, I can use it. It's just basic code. There's nothing proprietary in this in its construction.
I don't know that you'll get at the code at the beginning. It will be open source, but if you want to change it on day one, talk to me.
Okay.
You know,
So let me just repeat the question in a different way. So as you know, my lab tries hard not to use technologies that don't survive. So we're not using a lot of proprietary. So instead of using, for example, Unity or Unreal Engine to build the Viz space and the VR experience, we're hand coding it and using WebXR, right? And so I'm trying hard not to use Flash. I don't
Okay.
want to repeat the Flash
D-
mistake, right?
Dene, I think that it would be fantastic if you would write me a short paragraph saying what you need.
Okay.
Okay. And then let me take that back to the team and to the Internet Archive, and we'll come up with a good answer for you.
Okay.
Okay. Because I'm sure you're not the only one who's, with that question.
Yeah, I don't want to think. Here's what's happening right now with Scalar. So let me just finish this thought, Frode. Scalar is supposed to be HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but it sits in a template, right? And that template is, I'm finding, to be fragile. And it sits on a server that has to be managed pretty regularly because the server seems to get clogged up. And it has to do a little bit with not the use of people hitting on the sites, but actually the kind of pressure the system can take, right? So every
Right.
once in a while, scalar goes down. I have the code, I'm sitting on the code, but I can't recreate the template, which means all the books that I've produced on scalar can't be reproduced unless I hand code the whole damn thing. And that's 6 volumes of books, right?
I
A
don't
lot
think
of,
that will be a problem here.
okay. I'm trying to avoid
because
that kind of
because we will
experience.
let
I'm
you.
saying this, and let me just say this: this is on tape, and I don't want to disparage Scalar because Eric Lawyer and Tara McPherson are friends of mine. But there is a problem with using systems that have templates because we want things to last, right? And I don't want to go back and redo them in 10 years, and that becomes very tiresome. I don't have the money to do it in 10 years.
Well, one nice thing is, I mean, first of all, we don't have templates, which I think it's way too early for templates. But the what was I going to say? Scalar templates. Anyway, I'll think of it. Anyway, I hear your problem. Tell us exactly what you need, and we'll
Okay.
we'll get it for you. Oh, the other thing I was going to say was that you can run your own server
Yeah,
for
yeah, that's
Tapestry.
good. And we're not running the Scalar on our server. It sits on USC server, but
Right.
we are hosting the videos because they won't host videos, which is fine, right? Frode, I'm sorry to keep on going. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's a super important point, and to address that, I have a question for you, Bob, and then I have a comment afterwards. The question is, once this, because it was also quite sweet that you used our blog to post this in, so thank you. It was a really effective demonstration going to the audience's very home, to put it beautiful. Once this is kind of rendered, kind of saved, kind of made, obviously you can keep changing it, but once it's done that, does that require proprietary stuff at that point? I think that narrows down a little bit what Dene and I are talking about.
What do you mean? Give me an example.
What I mean is, let's say back in the day, Go Live. Do you remember Go Live?
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. You could do whatever you wanted. The software was owned proprietary, but when you produced the HTML page, that was normal HTML in the world. So is it similar here that when you are done with the tapestry and you publish it, that you don't need any proprietary Bob Stein, Brewster Kahle components anymore? Is it self-contained in HTML, so to speak, or open there?
Okay. How does your question relate to my embedding it in a blog?
It relates to when someone now goes to this page that you embedded it in, the embedded frame still goes from your system, of course,
Yes.
right? But let's say um, it just relates to, let's say your system goes down, but you've been kind enough and given us the code, so we have another server, all of that stuff. But in the far distant future, are there any bits of code that is needed to run this and present it that is proprietary?
I
Very
don't think I don't think so. I mean, again, I beg you to write this question down. It's so far above my technical pay grade. You know, there's no intention of screwing things up the way you mention. But I may misunderstand, or, we may have to make a change to make sure. I mean, I'm with you when you ask the question. My head says, of course there shouldn't be. I'm not 100% sure there isn't.
Yeah,
But
no, you just think,
that's why I need you to write down the question.
yeah, we absolutely will. And then the second half was just to say the biggest compliment I can give about this is that it's so bloody obvious, right? This is what it should have been in the world, and it isn't for whatever reasons. I mean, every once in a while, when we go back to Doug's demo, one of the things that's so beautiful, he can do this free form map, and each of the points are interactive. So you've managed to, in the best way, subvert the web to make a free-flowing It's just beautiful,
But
beautiful.
I think, what happened, I think the compliments to the web, though, It's all the developments of the last 30 years of the web where it's gotten to the point where the browser can support this. We couldn't have made tapestries 3 years ago.
Mark, you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's just check. Yeah, it's a very quick one. Is there? I've had a look at the future of text, and I know that there's a Tapestry's domain. Is there some referenceable site? I mean, is there
No,
anything
not
public
yet.
that we could?
Not
Okay.
yet.
Will there be anything, say, within about the next 3 weeks?
Yes. And first of all, anybody who sends me their email will get an invitation to the beta version this month,
Yeah.
within 3 weeks. And I think that the best thing that you might want to show people in 3 weeks is there will be a whole bunch of public tapestries that you can
Yeah.
show.
I mean, just to explain it, it's simply because I'm working on a paper on spatial hypertext, which is a bit tangential, but it speaks to the same thing. So there are no links visible, there are no lines telling you where to go, but there is, in a sense, some semantics in the way that you've laid things out. I think it's really interesting, and that's really what I would be looking to reference indirectly. But thanks so much. Lovely talk.
Fabien.
It's going to be very awkward because it's more of a show off than a question. Is it okay to try that?
Of course.
So hopefully, though, it will make sense. I just remembered I had some related tinkerings a couple of years ago. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my wiki where I put a bunch of stuff, things I'm learning about and whatnot. And on all pages, actually, I have a whiteboard function. And if I click on it, I'll take some items. I can go through, but I can also like move them around. And if I put them within this gray area, then it sorts them. You can see the listing on the right. So if I move this out, it goes out of the list. And I have a version where I have remarkable and places where I sketch on. And it's the same for those sketches. I can bring the sketches on the wiki, but then I can put the sketch in a specific order to kind of tell a story and eventually save to whatever other output I want to. And finally, and I can like snap it to make it flat so that it doesn't go all the way like on the grid, basically. And finally, I have a meta whiteboard where I can do this, but for the whiteboard of the whiteboards. So I can do this with the content inside. So I apologize for the show off part. I don't even have a point beside that. Yeah, moving things around and on the web to me is, it does make so much sense. And I think it's really powerful. So I'm excited for any kind of exploration in that direction. And I think it's, as you started with, like that's kind of how the web should have been or should even still be. So yeah, kudos.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a couple of programs that came out in the 2000s. Muse was a really great one. And it was an Adobe product. And a lot of my artist friends were producing these fabulous essays and poetry and multimedia environments. And then Adobe killed it, right? And it killed it before it killed Flash was next. The other one I liked that I thought was useful is iWeb. So another drag and drop technology. However, it depended heavily on templates, which caused its death eventually. Couldn't get to the code very easily. I could get to it, but it would take me days to strip out all the errant code that they could throw in there on purpose. So you couldn't use
I
the
think
code.
that one thing that's people ask me all the time, or say to me all the time, Bob, there are an endless number of endless canvas applications out there. And I say yes, but almost all of them are aimed at personal productivity or collaboration. There are very few that are aimed squarely at publication and presentation. And for me, because I'm old enough to remember when HyperCard came out, what happened was that literally millions of teachers and elementary school students and high school students started making things. And I wanted tapestries to be simple enough for an 8-year-old to start making things with tapestries. I had a wonderful conversation with a fourth grade teacher who said to me, you know, this is fantastic. She said, if I send my fourth graders home to write a paper, their eyes glaze over. But if I tell them, go to the internet and collect things on this subject, I can tell by what they collect and how they organize it on a tapestry page whether or not they understand the subject. And
Yeah, just to add, what I was going to say is that what I like about this system, far better than Muse and iWeb, is it's not template bound. It is not run by a major corporation that's going to take it down in a few years. I'm not going to have to spend the rest of my life trying to preserve it and get it running again.
Right.
I think there's some real advantages to your approach.
By the way, after the fourth grade teacher, the other day I was at the University of Amsterdam, and this professor said this fantastic thing. She said, you know, I can't assign papers anymore because my students just use ChatGPT, and I don't want to be a policeman. She said, but now instead of papers, I'm going to tell them to go home and make a tapestry. And what I'm going to ask them to do is to assemble the source documents that they would have used to write a paper with, to explain why they chose those source documents, to show the connections between those source documents. And from that sort of meta sort of presentation, I'll know whether or not, you know, they've grasped the subject or not. So which I thought was just a beautiful sort of rejiggering of the sort of essay proposition.
Yeah. Tom.
Yeah, I'd like you to have that ready to go by next week because I'm starting a class and I'm having that exact same experience. I mean, I'm very much a visual communicator.
If you literally mean that,
I literally mean next week. Yes.
Send me a note and I'll get you set up for next week.
Oh, awesome. Yes. All right. I will. I mean, I will send you a note because I definitely want to play in the beta too because it's similar to the kind of visual exploration stuff that I'm working on myself. I wanted to ask you one of the things I mentioned earlier in the chat, this idea about automating the information retrieval, and I understand the manual, and I definitely get what Dene is saying in terms of, you know, you want to be able to create a curated work on the one hand. But I want to actually, one of the things that I'm trying to create is a serendipity machine in the sense that I want to find unexpected connections. The analogy I make is that, you know, I've written several books. My books are footnoted and properly cited and all this sort of stuff, but there's a ton of stuff in my books that I have no idea anymore where it came from because it was something I heard from somebody 20 years ago or had a conversation or read a book or an article or something like that. I would love to be able to simply take my own book and dump it in there and find all those connections to documents and other things that are similar. And they may or may not be what I'm doing, where I learned it from, but it also gives me opportunities to see who's working on stuff in parallel, et cetera, et cetera. That to me as a researcher and a thinker is an incredibly useful thing. And that's kind of what I'm trying to build myself. And I'm seeing what you're doing here and I'm like, oh, this is so close to that. But yeah, I just wanted to, yeah, absolutely. And I will reach out. I would love to use this in my class.
What are you teaching? What's the class?
I am, you're going to laugh, U.S. government.
Perfect.
And I teach it as a problem-based class in the sense that I ask my students to identify a problem in society that relates to them, to actually define what that problem is. And you wouldn't believe how hard it is to get students to actually understand what a problem is as opposed to a solution. And then I ask them to look for policy solutions out there and preferably ones that have been tried and then analyze whether they worked or not. And then lastly, once you've figured out, okay, here's a good idea, we should try this. How do you navigate your way through the American political system to accomplish that goals? And their final product is a website, which is kind of a how-to website for someone who wants to figure out how to address the problem that they've identified using, you know, government as a means for doing that. So I can definitely, I use Miro a lot in my live instruction as a way of doing this
in an interactive manner. But I really want to be able to get them creating more visually. And as you say, I actually figured out how to completely do my third assignment, my essay assignment in Notebook LM by simply putting the textbook up there and throwing the question, and it writes a perfectly acceptable version of that blog, which is a problem with the assignment,
Right.
not the students cheating. So, but anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you. It looks like some people are coming in now, Frode, because they didn't understand the time switch. Fortunately,
Maybe.
Brandel has seen this.
Yeah, I
Really,
think
Matt?
My apologies, but I'm very excited to have a wider audience get in front of the workload.
Hi, how are you? And hi, Jimmy. So I want to go back to something that Frode said in the chat, and that is this is getting scarily close to spatial hypertext. And I think there's something to be said about that. And Mark, that's what you're writing about for the hypertext conference, right? Did you want to say something about that yourself?
No, not particularly. I mean, all I'm trying to do is to bring the notion of social spatial haptics to a wider group, because it's been as a hidden secret within a niche conference. And especially the work we're doing with XR, and you're back in sort of exploration spaces, and it just seems it's time to get people looping back to a lot of really interesting thought that was mainly done in the early 90s. And it's time to dust off some of that. And I'm talking to both Frank Shipman and Kathy Marshall at the moment as part of this to go back and sort of try and partly it's explaining that the problem of then is not the problem of now, but it's also difficult to explain to anyone who was born after the web or grew up not using hypertext before the web to really understand hypertext is something broader, and that spatial hypertext was an idea within that, but then can be laid back across all sorts of problem spaces.
But I see a lot of connections between this and what Klaus Azenbeck is doing with his project with Mother and other system. This is far less complicated and visual.
I have an interesting observation for this group in particular. I was somewhere and somebody asked me about how young people took to tapestries. And one of the things I mentioned was that it was usually a younger person in the room who asked me about tapestries and three-dimensionality. And, my answer is always, absolutely, we've always imagined this will eventually be 3D. But as I said it, I realized something that I never thought of before, which was that in a lot of ways, books or movies are 1D because they have only an x-axis with time and they just go forward. And the tapestries right now, one of the things that people like about it is that they're 2D. They have an X and a Y axis. And what they don't have, of course, yet is a Z axis, but we'll get there. But this idea that the print era gave us one dimensionality is something I hadn't really thought of before, because frankly, I didn't have much experience with a true 2D experience. I had a flat, sort of image, but an image is not 2D in the way that a tapestry is 2D, and because it can really move in both directions.
Thank you. Rob.
Very, very quickly, I was really taken by the description of the professor in Amsterdam who had the students collecting source materials and explaining how they would use the source materials in an article. But the tradition of academic writing involves writing articles. And I'm wondering about the transition from this actually more interesting way of doing it to producing something that would be useful to future researchers who are going to do this now in an XYZ axis. So that it was just a thought that initially I was sort of, no, that's wrong. We're losing the thread here. And on the other hand, I think it's going to be entirely different, but they still have to be able to find the stuff that's came before. And it's a long
I think
tradition.
that's the $1 million question. How do because understanding something is different than being able to write about it. And what happens to writing. I think the form of exposition is going to change, but I don't think we yet see how it's going to change. I did I did a tapestry once where there was a bunch of texts like the one about the Zuckerberg. Um, and I sent it to one of people on my team, and she started to write comments. She'd drag out a text box and write a comment and attach it to something on the tapestry. And then she'd write another text box and attach it to something else. And then she'd send it to me, and I would start writing text boxes and attaching them and drawing arrows and everything. And it was a very comfortable mode of collaboration. And in a lot of ways, if you took the summation of our comments back and forth with each other, there was a lot of interesting ideas in there. And I once, some of you may know Virginia Kuhn at USC. I helped Virginia, who wanted to do her dissertation in some software that we had written, and I said I would help her as long as she refused to to do a paper version or a PDF version. She only could do the electronic version with all of its videos and everything else. And she did, and it was quite a struggle to get the University of Wisconsin to accept it, but they did finally. And my goal ever since then has been to help midwife the first um, uh, dissertation that is one dissertation by two people. And I can see it being done in something like an extension of a tapestry where people, where the back and forth, the truth is often in the conversation. And the idea that two people could create something way better than one person is so obvious in some ways. Thank you, Doug Engelbart, from a long, long time ago. But we've never, but scholarly communications have never evolved to that point. And I really, really hope we start to see that. And tapestries might play a role. Maybe it won't be tapestries, but somebody somewhere is going to figure out a way to say that yes, collaboration is of value, and an academic paper can be doesn't have to the gold standard isn't the individual, but the collaboration.
Thank you. And then we have Frode.
Yeah, I just want to again say how obvious this is in retrospect, which is again the highest compliment I could possibly make. So we are looking at related work in XR, of course, and that makes me wonder about connections, the data links and see-throughness and so on. Obviously, it's really, really nice to be able to pipe through video, for instance. I think that's crucial because that means you don't really have to worry about that. You just have to worry about saying where it is and so on. Do you have any thoughts at this point of creating a tapestry exactly as you have and then allowing Fabien, let's say, to access that data for an XR environment or vice versa? Or what might a XR version of this look like in a 2D version? I know I'm being very, very visual here, but I mean, imagine, you're working on this,
Oh,
you embed one,
I
etc.
think it's
Sorry,
fine. I think, again, if Fabian would write a few paragraphs about what he would need to start to experiment with tapestries, we'll make it happen.
Thank you. Other questions and comments for Bob? I think it's an amazing system. Brandel has his hand up. Randall?
Um, as you were talking about collaboration, it made me think a little bit more about process and the sort of expository and discursive process of constructing a document and what is captured in the process of composing something rather than necessarily the finished state of the composition. Do you have any considerations as to how you would represent or consider how something gets put together as well as what it is, and if there's a difference in the context of a tapestry?
You know, the very first experiment we did at the Institute for the Future of the Book was we gave a NYU professor a blog. He said, I'm about to write a book about atheism. He wasn't a religion professor. He was a journalist, actually, and he was interested in the subject. Some publisher gave him an advance. And so we gave him a blog with the idea that he would post every day what he was thinking about but do it publicly. And what happened over the course of the year was basically he gathered a group of future readers who would respond to his sort of thought balloons and say, "Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that?" And his book, as a result, was way, way richer in the end because it had all this, frankly, collaboration. As you were talking, Brandel, off the top of my head, what I saw immediately was so a tapestry is an endless canvas. Starting tomorrow, somebody writes the first entry with lots of room for people to write comments and to let them. And then the next day, there's another entry. And, at the end of a month, 2 months, 3 months, you've got the point is it's all there. And if somebody recognizes a connection between day one and day eight, they can draw the arrow there. So I the the thing is that the web enables us, enable is in quotes, to see so much, but we haven't had very good tools for visualizing as much as we could see with the web. And I think tapestries is part of the change. I mean, Brandel knows I can't wait, even just the 2D tapestry, to see it inside of a Vision Pro, because I know that it can be much bigger inside of the Vision Pro than it can be on my simple Mac screen. And that starts to get very exciting to me.
Rob?
I just wanted to say when I started working at the Institute for the Future, the common topic was groupware, which was the sort of early kind of primitive ways of doing collaborative work. And this morning I read an article in the New York Times talking about how we have moved back into a zero-sum game world. And the idea of collaboration is out. And I'm also reading a book by the Houston Foresight Group, which is another futurist think tank. And one of the future trends that they're looking at is collaboration as a post-capitalist. The book is called Imagining After Capitalism. And the after capitalism, one of the major themes is collaborative work. And
Have you read Fred
I'm just
Jameson?
wondering, this is a turbulent transition we're having.
Yeah, as all the important ones are.
The comments I'm looking in the chat, I'm seeing that Brandel says, I love the idea of making a tapestry conventionally temporal with visual signage indicating a cluster of document being day one, another day two, etc. Any other further comments about that, Brandel?
No, just in response to Bob's sort of view of composition, and there's always this interesting sort of dichotomy between the content of like the formal sort of content or structure of a document system and the conventional capacity for it. And so being able to simply delineate something conventionally, that this is the day one of my religion blog, this is day two of my religion blog, and that kind of construction. I think it's an interesting tension that any kind of smart system inevitably experiences, is what is captured by the formalism and what is simply captured, or what is simply permitted to be captured by the convention within it. And at some level you need to pick, so Photoshop has layers by formalism, and then it has conceptual function of those layers by convention. And similarly in a context like this, that this is a web page, that is a web page is the sheer formalism, and then the convention can kind of hit other things. It's always interesting to play with where those boundaries are, but I think that your conventionalist approach to what you would do with temporality is a reasonable one to kind of consider the consequences of.
Thank you.
I'm a
We
print
have,
era boy, I can't escape it really. My grandchildren, I can't wait till they start playing with this stuff because they're not as hobbled as old people like I am by having grown up so severely in the print era.
So it's now 9:42, and I've been reminded that we have a formal presentation by Fabien. So, and then Frode is going to end this session by giving his final comments, and then we're over. So thank you. I want to give a hand to Bob for being here today and sharing with us. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Good to see you again.
It's really nice. It's really nice to present to this group. Thank you for inviting me.
Bob, you're invited all the time. Fabien, while you set up, why don't I do my 30-second close down so you can bleed out the time in a good way, yeah? Where did he go? Where did he go? Oh, you just moved on my screen. Is that okay, Fabien?
I tried to restore it so that I would be ready. So,
oh, you are ready. Okay, fine. Please go ahead then. That's good.
Well, I mean, let's see if I am. I'll try. There is always this Zoom single sharing. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I pre-recorded the video because this way it's a little bit more stable. We got the cube on the left, some of the command, and I can unfold the cube to become part of the size of the room, fold it back, move it around. Some of the text is too small, you can't see, but those are the name of the references. And I can't unfold it just flat. That's it.
Perfection.
Thank you. The couple more things that we discussed briefly today. So people want no background, everything being all gray when you're in VR, not AR. Some people like noise, so I just played with different kind of noises, like so much lighter, no colors. They just keep on animating over time, or they don't move at all. And I brought back the old school grid kind of at the bottom. Again, it's just to give options for a different noise, because it's like, think of it like a visual white noise machine. Some people prefer this, some want the perfectly uniform background, but why not show different options? And I think, I mean, aesthetically, again, not for everyone, but I do like it. And last but not least, based on the discussion last week, so here I'm in VR AR, I have the documents, and I have my VR hands. You can't see it, but trust me, well, I guess I can show it on the webcam. So I have my keyboard connected, and if I press the shift key, my hand is green. So I'm not sick. I'm relatively well fed, but it means that now we have modifiers basically. So here it just show it as green as a way to show that you were doing something, but otherwise it's just yeah, you press, I guess you can hear with the keyboard.
Yeah.
And that's based on Jimmy's remark, I want to say last week, I'm a little bit confused with time, that yeah, if you do have a keyboard that is actually there and that is very much more responsive, let's say, than a hand tracking, why not combine both? And that's it.
I love that. And so thank you. And I love the way we spread out the box, right? So Frode and I were talking about that before we started today. And the question I asked him, and I'll ask all of us, is that when we produce a cube, like when we think of a cube in real time, in real space, and in the physical space we're living in, does it have to be exactly the same experience in a virtual space. So a cube is going to be six-sided, but when we unfold a cube in the virtual space, can it take on more sides? Does it have to be limited? And so that's the debate I'd like to have as we move forward. And this goes to the laws of XR that I'm building for my paper for Hypertext 25 and spatial computing. So I really am interested in knowing how much we want to emulate the real world in the physical world and when it's necessary to do so. In-face cube, yeah, Mark, that's what I'm meaning. So the term cube becomes then kind of useless. It's something else. And what we don't have really yet is a term for what we're talking about. Knowledge object, who knows? But now we're using the word cube, but that does carry with it expectations of behaviors.
So to me, it's the first primitive we play with. It happens to be a cube, but it could be another primitive, and we could add more faces or the shape, let's say, but binding, I think, features to faces of that shape. I bet we're going to be able to find that useful regardless of the geometry of the shape itself.
Mark wants to say something, then Frode wants to show his slideshow today instead of Wednesday. So let's give Frode time for that.
Since we're here, would be nice.
Yes. Since we're all here, he has our attention. So Mark?
Very quickly, so we get to Fred's thing. I was just going to say that we had a useful conversation with Fred earlier. And I mean, your point about primitive, I think, is good, because I sort of seeing the cube, how many faces it has, as almost being like seeing the inside of the information object. Because just because we may be writing on this one and not on that one, they're all essentially information objects. They're just globs of data in space, is another way of thinking about them. But obviously enough for us to interact with them, it's useful to be able to see aspects of it. Quite what we see will probably be dependent on what the object is. But I think it's yes, it's a nice metaphor. Thank you.
Hey, Frode, let's let you take over.
Thank you. This is what I was thinking about last week. And it binds all of this together. I think it's kind of, for me, it was a big deal. For you, it's probably obvious. I was sitting in Fabien's living room not long ago with the family, and he moved some papers on the table. He has a beautiful lounge table. Hopefully you all get to see it at some point. He designed it. But he moved some magazines. And this is something we would all normally do in our homes. We want things in certain ways. Otherwise, it's a mess. But what I realized then that is so pertinent to what we're doing in spatial and what the Tapestry is doing is that I realized that I didn't see those magazines as being messy, but Fabien did, because order is a decision, right? If you walk down the street and you don't pay attention, you don't really know what's in order. But when you walk into your own home, if that isn't there or that's at the wrong angle, you've made a decision. And that's what order is. So what you have with the Tapestry, Bob, along with so many other things that's amazing, you allow people, intentionality is related to it, you allow people to put things for a reason. So if it moves a bit, it is no longer in order. So you have to order your thoughts in order to have something, to make a decision. I just thought that was really, really fascinating to see it come up today. So briefly now, just a couple of slides. These are designed only to be think pieces around, hang on, I have too much of you guys on the side here, obscuring. Just think pieces, no decisions or anything like that. But we have this idea of a cube in the environment, and there are some obvious principles. They don't hang together grammatically, but connections are as important as content, especially in academia and with knowledge work. Hiding is as important as showing information, because you've got to manage the space. Grouping/binding as important as individual objects. This is all the stuff you're doing, Bob, so it was so great to see it again today. So here's basic notion. You can turn the cube for different information, but then we've been talking about, first of all, how you add objects. It may be you just quite literally drag something from the space onto the object, as Fabien has made possible. Also notes, and they can appear on a different side. You're doing different things to shape this thing at a basic level. And then you get to the question that Dene just raised. What in the world does opening a cube mean? This one has 9 sides, right? It's more like origami. It's like we're cheating. Why not? We may choose not to. we may choose, we have to deal with the real world geometry, maybe not, right? Maybe we have some command things stuck onto it. But here's the thing. If we want to have also a linear text in it, maybe the 3-column center is connected for that. Maybe what we do is have space put together for citations or maps. And then what I'm working with Mark Anderson particularly on is trying to understand the real spatial hypertext and how it relates. Maybe the maps on the right are spatial hypertext. Maybe you can tear them off. Maybe that's all they are, 2D tapestries or spatial hypertext, depending on your need, right? Maybe not. You can have control bars on the side, all these things we can think of. And then in getting to the end here, this is a philosophically difficult issue. If you have things in space, like let's say top right is a Bob Horn mural that Brandel has made large and small, you wouldn't necessarily want to see that only inside these cubes. You may want to have it off to the side. What does that mean? How does it relate to it, right? And these random 3D objects, they should be able to, like baubles of a Christmas tree, go in space where you want them, but still be owned by this thing that you're authoring, because the cube is your authoring thing, right? So here's a closed cube, and then we can have connected cubes to see citation maps maybe, or maybe we take inspiration from Ted Nelson's zigzag. Not necessarily exactly the same, but we allow ourselves to be inspired by it, to have multiple ways these blocks, because they are more Lego blocks than anything, can be connected. And finally, in this, what is a binding? What is a collection of cubes? Is it literally in a transparent box? I don't know. But this was some very, very basic stuff just to give us more to disagree and agree on. So thank you for having a look at that.
And Frode, did you want to make some closing remarks today?
That was my closing remark. So thank you. And I hope that being inspired by the tapestry, which is a real thing that is really useful, how might that more relate to what we're talking about with volumes? It's not obvious, but once we write it down or sketch it, it becomes more real for us. Okay, so that was my real.
Here's your closing remark. That's your
That
closing
was my
remark.
real one.
Okay. All right.
Thank
Everybody,
you.
have a
Everyone.
wonderful week. Mark, I'll see you at 11. Bye, dear.
Bye, everybody.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
week.
Everyone, take care.
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Bye bye.